Contrary to popular belief, locking out the joints is not dangerous and will not lead to long-term injuries. This is a common myth propagated by gym bros who usually have no idea what they're talking about. So let me start off this video by asking you a very simple question. Can you provide me any evidence to suggest that locking out is bad? No, because it doesn't exist. None of the exercise science experts are deeming this to be an issue, and there's no meta-analysis that says this is actually a problem. So right off the bat, you can close out this video. But if that's not enough, because I know you're gonna say, well, anecdote is everything and eventually it's gonna catch up. We're gonna hit that point. How about I lead you in the opposite direction? Let me make a bold statement. Stay with me. It might actually be that locking out is better for your joints. Yes, you heard it right here. Why? Because the human body is a lot more resilient than we once thought. And we can even go back a few years ago where people were saying, don't bring your knees over your toes. Don't flex your spine. Everything's got to be rigid like a steel rod. That turned out to be false. Basically, we can adapt to many positions as long as we slowly load the tissues over time. And in this way, the extreme argument would be that there's no bad exercise at all, just their misapplication. So just to say, if you want to strengthen the tendons and ligaments to their full capacity, you gotta lock out, as well as do the maximum lengthening position on whatever exercise you might be doing. So instead of doing half reps on the bench and leaving a slight bend in your elbow, no, you want to go to the body, maybe even going beyond by doing deficit work or using feet up versions of the bench press, and then do a full extension of the arm. In this way, you minimize pec and elbow injuries. Same goes for overhead press. It's actually superior to lock out your elbows because this allows the scapula to fully rotate. If you're doing OHP just like this, we can argue that that's not the best thing for the shoulders. You want to get that full extension of the arm. This builds mobility. It's what we see with Olympic weightlifters. Heck, we have orthopedic surgeons recommending dead hangs on a pull-up bar. This opens you up. And the only way you can achieve that is by locking out your damn elbow. And on that topic as well, I always have to laugh when people have the balls to reference elbows because you're looking at someone who has hypermobile elbows. It's a rare condition, but I got it. So your statements that you can't lock out with heavy weight or whatever is fucking bullshit. Same thing for the knees. You'll have guys saying, leave a slight bend when you're squatting. My question to you would be, how in the fuck are you supposed to unrack the weight if you're not locking out? Do you know how inefficient that is? Like, sure, you could good morning your way up and leave a slight bend as you awkwardly walk out, but I would say that's more dangerous and less stable. Basically, nobody ever destroyed their knees by doing an unrack with reasonable weights. If you're doing 3 sets of 10 on a barbell back squat, full range of motion, and you stand up, and maybe you got to take a few deep breaths at the top to reset your form, that's not causing shearing forces destruction. Because if that were true, you'd have to argue that 20 rep squats are the most dangerous thing you can possibly do. Yet many people report this feels even better on the knees compared to heavier lifting. So what is it? The locking out or something else? If an injury is to occur, 9 out of 10 times it's going to be in dynamic movement, usually exceeding your tissue capacity, or you accused some type of overuse problem that was developed way back. And that could have been avoided with proper programming. It is not full range of motion exercise that's causing these problems. Now on that topic of getting stronger with proper ROM, it should be noted that you pretty much have to do this if you're a strength athlete or are a serious lifter who wants to maximize your performance. There's no other way around this. Why? Because you need to properly develop the movement pattern while not having any weak links, which is guaranteed to happen if you don't lock out. If you want really grindy bench presses past the midpoint, leave a slight bend in your elbow. And by the way, if you continue to train like this, eventually this could alter your form in a significant way to the point where you lose your explosiveness, or you're now using compensation strategies, putting more emphasis on other muscles that maybe aren't as strong. Perhaps now you start rounding your back like crazy on deadlifts. Same thing for weighted pull-ups. If you're always doing half reps and one day I put you in that deep stretch out position, you won't be able to pull yourself out at all. You're going to be so freaking weak, and it's going to take months of rebuilding the proper weight. Not to mention the inferior back gains you'll get. Not saying you gotta do complete dead hang, but just to say, partials do have their place, but shouldn't be the only thing we do, especially on competition movements that have a higher skill component. Don't butcher them and create weaknesses that could have been avoided in the first place. Now, on this topic of partials, I can already hear people saying, well, Alex, there is research to say that lengthened partials are effective for hypertrophy. And to that, I will never deny that. However, never does it state that it's superior to full range of motion or that it somehow spares the joints. So don't twist the evidence, that's just being disingenuous. At the same time, in those exact papers that these people talk about, they also reference shortened partials. And to do that, what's the only criteria? You have to lock out. So that's literally a contradiction. In other words, if you want to fully contract your triceps, get that maximum squeeze, the only way to do that is to lock out your damn elbow. Leaving a slight bend would actually be inferior in this case if we're trying to emphasize the shortened position. The same goes for training the rectus femoris. If you're doing a sissy squat or leg extension, you actually want to lock out your knee to get the full contraction. Why would you not do this if you're deliberately manipulating the strength curve to make the end phase more difficult? Like, you either believe in varying the joint angle stress or you don't. So in the event where you just don't want to lock out at all, well, just do lengthened partials and call it a day. But then don't complain about the opposite being dangerous. Fourthly, you'll hear a lot of talk about time under tension and how locking out the joints cuts this out. You took tension off the muscle and now it's not going to grow as optimally. You messed up the set, bro. Well, truth is, proximity to failure matters more than time under tension. And taking a little half-second break at the top should not lead to inferior growth. If anything, the gains will be practically identical, which means you probably should lock out to get the strength and full range of motion joint benefits, if you ask me. Time under tension is seriously overrated if progressive overload is taking place and your reps in reserve is pretty close to zero. Like, if you're getting anywhere between 0 and 3 reps in reserve per set on high quality compound movements, also addressing your weaknesses through isolation work, you're properly managing your volume and intensity, you're not ego lifting, the numbers are gradually going up over time, like, you're not gonna have trouble putting on mass. So stop thinking in these bodybuilder terms and instead look at the size principle. Finally, I must point out that the majority of people who fearmonger you into not locking out are typically extremely weak, and their numbers don't justify having joint stress in the first place. In other words, if you're benching between 185 and 225 and complain about elbow pain and therefore say, oh, it's because I locked out, I'm sorry, bro, I don't mean to be a douche, but you do not know how to program. Hire a coach, change what you're doing. You are absolutely clueless. Unless you were born with a pre-existing condition or had past injuries, this really shouldn't be happening. And so, it's typically the advanced to elite lifters who have been training hard for years that have amassed such incredible numbers that the absolute load itself starts to potentially be problematic, which has to be managed through proper programming. And the X factor variable that leads to pain is not the lockouts. So just want to point that out as well. So basically, if someone is a top 1% competitive powerlifter who's regularly benching in the 400s, squatting the 600s, or whatever number you deem to be extremely impressive, if they're always doing that, well, the chance of injury is already going to be higher, which is not you. Let's keep it real. So most of your basic strength goals are probably going to be fine for the joints in the long term. Remember, you are not on the world stage and you're not the best of the best. But if you do decide to go down that path, there's obviously greater risk. And it's not because you locked out your knees or your elbows or whatever some gym bro is saying is going to cause you to enter Snap City forever, okay? And keep in mind, even the powerlifters who do get hurt often have comebacks and still manage to do really freaking well. And with that said, I'm done ranting. Hope you enjoyed my extensive discussion on locking out. Now I want to know from you, what do you think? Do you believe it's dangerous or fine? Let's hear your reasons, and I'll talk to you all next time.